Welcome to If These Walls Could Talk. I'm your host and super CEO, Lindsay Liu. Joining me today is Todd Ortscheid, the CEO of Revolution Rental Management and partner at PM Assist. Fun fact, before running property management organizations, Todd was a pilot for a major airline based in Atlanta for 14 years. This care for process and safety has transitioned into his role as an operator and consultant, where he helps other property managers maximize revenue and improve process automation. Today, he'll share a story about the early COVID days and the many learnings for property management teams as they navigated an unprecedented situation. Todd, thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
First, I'd love a little context on your portfolio and just tell us about what your portfolio looks like so we can get some context going into how you were having to handle the kind of COVID pandemic.
Gotcha. Yeah. So today the portfolio looks a little bit different than it did then. Even though it seems somewhat like just yesterday, it's been a few years now. At the time, we were in a couple of different markets, actually 3 different markets. We were in Georgia and Florida. We managed about 600 properties or thereabouts at the time. And it's all across the board. So we have people in, very high end, $8,000 a month, A-class properties, all the way down to, $500 a month Class C properties. So it's a very diverse portfolio in lots of different neighborhoods. And that's kind of what the portfolio looked like at the time. We eventually sold off the Florida operation a year or so ago, but that's where we were then.
Great. And so COVID has kind of come into the public consciousness, not to bring us all the way back to all of that, but obviously, there were people were just freaking out, right, at the time, and it was really unclear what to do and how to handle it. And obviously, people were spending a lot more time at home as well. So, what were some of the initial concerns that you had as this was starting to settle in?
Yeah, obviously, for landlords and for property managers, thinking back to, that would have been like March, April of 2020 when everything was just getting going with COVID, and nobody really knew quite what to expect because it was just if you watched CNBC, if you watched any of the major news networks, it was just panic. What are we going to do? Everybody's shutting down. Who's going to get a paycheck? Who's going to pay rent? So, it was just it was uncertainty, and for a lot of people, it was just panic as to what's going to happen. Am I going to have a business? Am I going to have my rental properties? What's going to go on? So, it was a very uncertain, very difficult time right there at the beginning, I think, for everybody.
And you mentioned you have quite a diverse portfolio. How did it affect different segments of your portfolio differently?
Yes, I'll say we were worried that it was going to affect things a lot more than it actually ended up affecting things. So, once everything once Congress realized that they had to kind of step in and do something, it kind of fixed some of the problems. But at first, we were really worried that especially our Class C, Class D portions of the portfolio were really going to struggle because, a lot of people in those kind of properties are retail workers, service workers, people who work in the restaurant industry. And a lot of this stuff was just completely shutting down. So there was a big concern that nobody in these properties is going to be able to pay rent. They might, have to skip out and go look for other employment elsewhere. So, we didn't know. But that's where we were primarily worried, was at that end of the portfolio. Because, as you know, most of us work in white collar jobs. We just worked from home and everything kept going as normal. So, it was really more the service workers, retail workers, that kind of stuff that we were really concerned about what might happen.
And remind us, in Georgia and Florida, in the markets you were in, were there any eviction moratoriums that were placed? Was there anything that affected your landlords and how you had to operate?
There was. It was temporary, so it wasn't like, some of the West Coast states where they held on to those moratoria for a couple of years. It was kind of, shorter term, but we did have those. So, I can't remember, it's been so long now, I can't remember exactly how long it took. But aside from just the moratorium, it was backlogs. So, during the moratorium period and the courts were literally shut down, during the early stages, the cases just piled up. So, there just got to be this huge stack of cases that, we're still getting through some of those today. It was literally, I think, 4 or 5 months ago when we finished processing an eviction case that had been going on since 2020. So some of them just took forever.
Okay, so you are worried about a segment of your tenants and their ability to basically be able to go to work, right?
Mhm.
So, what do you do next?
Well, so we had long maintained a just a short list of charities that, if a tenant was late on their rent, or they let us know that they were struggling, they lost their job, something like that. We would send them this list of, I think we had like 3 or 4 charities on the list at the time, just kind of, the top ones that we were aware of in our area. So when we saw that this was happening with COVID, I asked my employees, I said, just having 3 or 4 charities probably isn't going to cut it anymore. We need to, it's this. We didn't know that rent assistance was coming from the government at that point, so we needed to kind of prepare. So I asked my team. I said, go and see if you can get like a list of every charity you can think of in Georgia and Florida that offers rental assistance for people who are struggling, and let's put together a whole list. And so we did that in a matter of days. The team did a great job, put that list together, and my idea was I'll send this out to all of our tenants and let if you're struggling, if you're having difficulties right now, here's some people who can help. Because obviously we can't just waive the rent, but we want to see what we can do to try to help out. And yeah, it didn't work out well, but that was kind of the intent of what we were trying to do.
Okay, so your intention was I'm going to send you some resources. I want to help out in case you are in need, right, of assistance. Here is where you can go to talk to. Now, what
Exactly.
happens?
So we send that out, and I can't remember exactly how long it was, whether it was a day or two, but this is a point where everything's shutting down. So I basically sent that message out, I think the day before the governor of Florida, because I was in Florida at our Florida office. I think it was the day before he shut everything down for 2 weeks. So I go home and I'm just like relaxing. I'm like, okay, now we'll just see how things shake out with this pandemic. And I think I woke up the next day, if I remember right, and my email inbox was just filled with hate mail. And I was like, what on earth is going on here? And I start looking through it. And finally, I find one message. Most of them are just telling me how I'm a terrible person and all this kind of thing. But I finally get to one that has a screenshot of a Facebook post. And I looked at it and I said, okay, well, that's a Facebook post from one of our tenants who has been behind on her rent actually from before COVID. So it wasn't even COVID related. She had been behind on her rent for like 2 months, but she had posted in this anti landlord Facebook group that we were these terrible people because we were suggesting that they go to charity instead of just us waiving the rent, which is apparently what the tenant thought we should do. We should just say, no one has to pay their rent until the pandemic's over.
You
So,
become the nonprofit.
exactly. That's kind of the idea. We be the charity, even though we are not a charity. So, that's what she expected. And for people who don't know, I mean, if you've never looked around on like Facebook and TikTok and places, there are entire groups of people who will literally just post, memes of how, landlords should all be sent to the guillotine and all this kind of stuff. And was never even aware of these things before. And now, after our tenant posted into one of these groups, it just spread like wildfire through all of these groups. And they found my address, they found my phone number. I got death threats. It was craziness.
So you woke up to an inbox full of strangers, essentially,
Yep.
emailing you. Kind of the gist of it being, what, you're a terrible person. You're this big corporate conglomerate. What what was the
That
range?
that's the crazy thing is I don't think a lot of people realize that the average landlord is not this big giant corporation. And that's what we quickly figured out is everybody just kind of assumes if you're in property management or if you're a landlord, you must be a billionaire. You must just have unlimited funds. And people don't realize that the average landlord has one house, maybe two, and a property management company is usually representing these individual middle class landlords. So everybody is thinking we're a giant evil multinational corporation. That's kind of how they're sending their messages. Like, how can you not just waive the rent? And obviously, I don't think that even those companies should waive rent. They have to collect their money, but that's how the average person was looking at it. So that's who they thought we were. And meanwhile, we're just representing, a lot of these properties, especially in that C and D class that we manage, are properties that those owners purchased for $50,000. These are not expensive houses. The people who bought them, those landlords, are usually, a lot of our clients are military. So they would buy a house, they'd get transferred because we used to have a military base here in Atlanta, and then they just have to rent out their house. So these are middle class people, in many cases military, especially since we used to offer a military discount for those people. So, they don't get that that's who the average landlord is. It's not Warren Buffett or Jeff Bezos. That's not your average landlord in America.
Speaking as a small-time landlord myself, not a billionaire. Not yet, anyway.
Same, yes.
Okay, so this spreads like wildfire, and you're the target of this. Like, you're the face of all the bad landlords out there. Is that kind of what's happened?
Yeah, basically. So, I mean, the tenant spread it around, and it was just this one tenant. I mean, everybody else was great, by the way. I want to make that clear. I mean, we had no other tenants who complained, posted anything. It was just this one tenant who thought she should get away with not paying the rent. And eventually it made its way to the local NPR station. So, that's, when I got the phone call, and I actually went and got a friend of mine who works in PR, works in press relations, and said, can you help me out? Draft me a letter that I can send, a written statement. I sent that to them. The actual article that they ended up posting, and I don't even know if it's still on, it might even still be on their website. I'm not sure, but it wasn't that unfair, to be honest with you. I think they did a pretty decent job in how they put it together. It wasn't, like a complete hit piece or anything like that. But, the damage was done. And then at that point, once it went on, the hate mail kept coming in, and it died down. You know how these things work with memes and everything. It dies down after a week or two. But for that week or two, it was awful. Not fun. But eventually, it kind of petered out, and ultimately, it actually helped us on the business development side, because landlords would look at it and say, "Oh, well, it's someone who enforces the lease. They're doing their job." So, I mean, our clients look at it and said, "Okay, no problem." But it was just a stressful time, to put it mildly.
Amidst everything else that's happening, right, in the world
Exactly.
at that moment,
Yes.
you're also, a lot of people sitting idly at home writing you letters.
Yep.
And so
Exactly.
you
Yep.
actually picked up the phone for that NPR call, because you were also getting other phone calls as
I
well.
did. So I spoke off the record, kind of on background, and then I sent a formal, statement from the PR person I know. So I didn't do like an interview or anything like that, because my PR person recommended I not. But yeah, that's kind of how we handled that. And I can't really say it turned out badly. It was just stressful while it was going on, is all I could say.
Absolutely. Did you connect with any of the charities that you had recommended, or did any of them reach out to you as a result of this?
Not as a result of this, but I mean, we did have people who use those resources. And I mean, it wasn't just for COVID. I mean, we always get those where, there are local charities who will help people out with a month or two of rent to help them get back on their feet if they have a temporary loss of income. So, I mean, those are always great resources. I mean, if people aren't aware of those, I mean, they are out there. There are, charities that specifically help with rent for people who lose a job or something like that. And so there was a number of people who did that. And then, of course, ultimately, there was the rental assistance that flowed out to the states, and lots of people got help through that. So, it ended up being not as bad as anyone thought it was going to be at the beginning. Ultimately, people mostly made it work. And we only ended up with a handful of those really long, drawn out evictions that, just took forever.
It's always the fear of the unknown. That's the
Yes,
scariest, right? Well,
exactly.
fun fact, I actually was part of starting one of those nonprofits early in COVID with a group of just really great individuals that came from the finance world. And it was all about
Nice.
that. It was it was called Neighbor Share. And it was neighbors coming together to help their communities, right? If you had a little extra to spare, help pay for someone's groceries or help them pay for
Nice.
half their rent. And so being able to find people in need and match with that. So I think, the flip side of that time is there was a lot of great community activism that came together to help each other out as well, right?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, it's crazy when you start to think back to how, bad things could have been, and how, it worked out relatively okay for the most part for most people. Obviously, there was a lot of people who suffered and everything while it was going on, but I mean, things could have been so much worse. So, it's nice where, people like you and even the government, I'll throw them, a little bone, they stepped in to help out a little bit. But yeah, society kind of came together and made it work, which, everything could have been a disaster, and it wasn't, thankfully.
Totally. Silver lining, right? I think that's like such Interesting point with this story. It was one person that
Yes,
created, it just went viral, right? So
that's it. That's all it takes is one person out of 600, and there you go. You got your inbox filled.
there you go. So looking back, is there anything you would have done differently in terms of how you communicated with your tenants?
Yeah, I think I probably would have gone to that, my PR friend first and said, "Could you draft this original email that goes out to our tenants?" Because I'm sure I could have, worded it better. I did a video and I just kind of winged it on the video, and I'm sure, it would have been better to have like a script and work off a teleprompter and have it crafted in a way that might, worked a little better. So I would say, any of those sorts of things, talk to someone who's like a communication specialist or something if you're in, I know it's not really, crisis communication, so to speak, but it was kind of like that. And it's better to have someone help you as a professional in those sorts of things. So I would have worked harder to make sure that the email was worded in a way that might be perceived a little bit better. It seemed fine to me when I sent it out, but I mean, you can never at all, even if you just have a friend look over those sorts of things, they can find things that maybe someone's going to read this differently than you do, and kind of help you put those things together in a way that'll come across better.
I mean, so you sent a video? This is why you were the face of it. Now I understand. There was a video of you talking through this.
Yeah, I don't remember if they actually posted the video or anything anywhere. I honestly can't remember at this point. But yeah, I mean, there was. So we usually do that. I'll send out like we'll do like a blog post, a video with a written thing, because you know how it is. Some people prefer to do video. So yeah, we had done that. But I can't remember if it was actually posted anywhere on the Facebook groups or anything or not.
Yeah, I mean, I think, just a reminder, right, of just how sensitive that time was. I think, again, fear is a really big motivator for folks. And then, the fear of losing your home, right? Such a kind of critical thing. And it's just a reminder that this is the industry, like this industry is responsible for people's homes as well. And that is just always going to be full of sensitivities as well.
Definitely.
So how have you changed how you communicate with your residents now? You don't run everything through a PR person now, do you?
No, no, but I always run it by somebody else. So anything that I think might be even the slightest bit, it could rub anybody the wrong way in even the slightest way. I'll run it by my wife or another employee, somebody else, just to have a second set of eyes on it. I think that's always helpful. And the crazy thing is, I mean, I always did that. When I was a pilot, I was in the labor union. I was one of the executives at the union, and we had, that's where I knew the PR person from. We always ran everything through someone else before. You never just send out a communication yourself. But then you become a small business owner, and you're just kind of, for a long time until you have employees, you're kind of on your own, and you're just used to doing things, shooting from the hip, so to speak. And that's kind of what you get used to. And you got to make sure you don't do that. Run things through somebody else, get a second set of eyes on it, another opinion, and that can really be helpful, I think.
That's a great piece of insight. Also, I feel like there is no better person to use the analogy of building the engine while you fly the plane. Is that what it is? Building the plane while you fly it?
Exactly, yes.
So you haven't learned exactly everything from your previous days as a pilot. You would not have flown that plane.
Exactly. Yes, there's always more to learn, definitely.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. If anyone wants to get in touch with you to learn more about PM Assist or Revolution Property Management, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, they can go to our website, propertymanager.assist.com, or if they want to email me, really easy to get in touch, Toddo, at propertymanager.assist.com. And sometimes it takes me a day or two to respond, but I'll respond to anybody who reaches out to me.
Amazing. Well, that's today's episode of If These Walls Could Talk. Super is the AI-powered communication and workflow tool for property managers. To learn more about Super, visit us at www.hiresuper.com. And to share a story you have for a future episode, email us at hello@hiresuper.com.